It's match day here in Spain, with Arsenal looking to complete the first phase of the Champions League in style by going through to the last 16 of the competition as one of the top finishers in that league table. We've got transfer news, we've got team news and more in today's Arsenal Transfer Show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is the Arsenal Transfer Show, joining you every single morning at 8 a.m. UK time. You join me this morning from Spain, or rather, I should rather say, from Catalonia. With, of course, Girona being the opponents for today's Champions League match, and hoping, of course, that Arsenal can get a good win while rotating players. We're going to be talking about that game a little bit later on, doing a little bit of a mini preview, so stick around for that. Good morning to those joining us live in the chat box, though. Hope you're doing good. Hope you're doing well. Black Shine, good morning to you, to Matt G, to Glenn, James, Paul, Mark, we'll get Errol, Steve, plenty more as well. Knowledge, Shari, Gavin, Rich, Jitty, Mike, and more joining us too. I hope you enjoyed yesterday's show. I hope it was a little bit of a surprise, joined by, of course, Nepenthes, EAFC or FIFA, kind of the football game, for those that don't know. YouTuber, of course, who is also a massive Arsenal fan, and someone who's been, as he said, following the channel for quite a little bit of time. And it was great to chat to him on the weekend and give you that show yesterday. So I hope you enjoyed that, and thank you for all the very kind comments left on yesterday's show, and thank you again to Nep for sparing his time with us. But we move to today, and we move, of course, through to the January transfer window and looking ahead to tonight's fixture as well. We begin, though, with Kieran Tierney. Brendan Rodgers confirming that Kieran Tierney will be a Celtic player by the summer. It is still unknown whether or not this deal will happen in January, or whether or not it will indeed be kind of delayed through until the summer. It will require Celtic to negotiate with Arsenal. To my understanding, that's not happened yet, that those kind of conversations have been taken on specifically with the player and not necessarily with the club. I think that it will be very much dependent upon some other players' futures, like Alexander Zinchenko, for instance. I think Zinchenko is somebody who could be sold during this window. There's interest from Borussia Dortmund. There's interest from Atletico Madrid. If any club was to say come in for Zinchenko and he was to leave, I think they would instead be very resistant to the idea of Kieran Tierney leaving during this January transfer window. But the kind of that story, both stories remain open at this stage of play. Miles Lewis-Skelly, his red card appeal was successfully upheld, meaning that he will not miss the next 3 games after an independent panel voted in favour of the Arsenal man, and therefore we have that confirmation that it was indeed the wrong decision to send him off against Wolves at the weekend. Arsenal thankfully coming out with a victory in that game. It could have been very, very different indeed. So yes, very, very positive that that has indeed occurred, and that Miles Lewis-Skelly will be an Arsenal rather an Arsenal player. It'll always be an Arsenal player, we think, but certainly available for Arsenal during these next few matches. We'll hear from Mikel Arteta and his thoughts on this very shortly towards the end of the slides. Arsenal completed their latest training session yesterday, in which both Martin Odegaard and Mikel Merino were both available. Of course, they both missed the most recent fixture where they weren't available for the game against Wolves, but it appears they are both back and ready for selection, meaning that they could both be in action for tonight's game against Girona in the Champions League. So make sure you're looking out for their performances. I think we need to give Odegaard some minutes, of course, leading up into that game against Manchester City this weekend. Into potential incoming transfer news, and Sever Nipan has continued to be linked with the club. There are 3 notable teams interested. Those are, of course, Arsenal, Aston Villa and Girona, who Arsenal, of course, are playing this evening. The irony of all of that is not lost, I don't think, on anybody. Manchester City are not the team interested in trying to sign Girona, but instead it is the Spanish side looking to put forward a proposal that I imagine would showcase plenty more senior football. Arsenal will, of course, themselves be putting forward a package which tries to convince Nipan that he can indeed get plenty of game time. He would be, to my understanding, part of kind of the senior squad almost immediately, and they want to showcase that to the player and hope that, of course, that he might indeed be able to come and play for the Gunners. But also it's about kind of batting away that interest from other teams. But negotiations are indeed continuing on this front. It would be a deal that is rather expensive. That may indeed lean more in Arsenal's favour over the Spanish side. We were going to have to wait and see. Now, I don't mean or want to be the bearer of bad news, but like it is getting incredibly late in the day regarding the January transfer window. The likelihood of Arsenal signing like a major player during this window, well, it's diminishing by the minute. And to be honest, at this stage, if you were to ask me whether or not I felt that Arsenal would do business for one of their major targets like a Benjamin Sesko, I'm incredibly pessimistic about that opportunity. I think Arsenal will do something, but I think that that something is most likely to be a loan of some description. I see these Matthias Tell suggestions right now, not specifically to Arsenal, and I've certainly not been able to confirm that Matthias Tell is a player that Arsenal are interested in. But I wouldn't be surprised if Arsenal suddenly threw their hat into the ring for a potential loan move for Matthias Tell between now and the deadline. And that could be an option for Arsenal. But it would only be a loan for a European player. Of course, Neto and Sterling, there is no intention from an Arsenal side, to my understanding, to either make one of those deals permanent or to cancel one of those loans. And so therefore, Arsenal could not go for, say, an Evan Ferguson unless they were trying to sign him on a permanent deal. So it's very, very difficult for Arsenal to do that. Only a European loan is sanctionable for the club. Maybe Matthias Tell is one of those. He is a player that is expected to leave during this January window. He is a player that can play both through the middle and in the wide areas. So maybe that's what we will see. Mikel Arteta, of course, did face the press, and I was there at the Stadio Montelivi to talk to Mikel Arteta ahead of the game tonight. He confirmed his reaction to that Miles Lewis-Skelly appeal, to which he said, obviously very happy that the decision has been made and that Miles is going to be able to play for us again. He was asked, I think, by Jordan about from the Sun whether or not he had actually spoken to Miles, but he was asleep on the plane when he got the news and didn't wake him up. I asked whether or not, of course, that his availability for the game against Manchester City more means that it could affect Arteta's decision-making when it comes to the game tonight. And he said, well, it does affect it, yes, because obviously we've had a lot of uncertainty, not only for Sunday, but for tomorrow and for the next few games as well. So now we have more options. He's going to be available, and it's something very positive for the team. Now, on transfers, actually, before we go to transfers, just a couple of lines on the Michael Oliver abuse, of course, as well. Yesterday, again, saw a huge swell of kind of Arsenal social media presence and a lot of rhetoric about Arsenal supporters, Arsenal fans, and, of course, in the wake of the refereeing decisions and frustrations. And Arteta was naturally asked. And there was a feeling, certainly from my side, that because of how open and clear he was about the abuse that Kai Havertz has suffered, that naturally that there had to be some kind of response regarding the abuse that Michael Oliver has suffered. And so therefore he said, the same as every time I talk about that topic, regardless of whether it's a player or a coach or a referee, it doesn't matter. We have to really work harder to try to eradicate that part of the game. That brings nothing but bad stuff, bad taste, and it makes people's lives more difficult. And let's get it out. Let's kick it out of the game. He was asked actually in Spanish a little bit later on in the press conference as well about the Michael Oliver situation and how indeed things can improve. And that was translated for us. And he gave a really good answer. Again, he said, we're always putting a lot of emphasis on where football is going in the next 5-10 years, on the rules and all sorts of things. But I think one of the most important things we can do is create an environment that's much better on a social level, one that's healthier, that's nicer, in which we reward things that are not only winning, that when people make mistakes, they have the chance to fix it. We shouldn't be here with the hatred these things that we see, because they affect everyone. And in the end, they take away the joy of this sport and the reason for it, which is to enjoy ourselves and have good moments. And thank you to Sid Lowe for translating that for us in the press room yesterday. People are angry, people are annoyed, and they have a reason to be angry and they have a reason to be annoyed. And Anthony Taylor and Michael Oliver and all of these referees that have made mistakes and made questionable decisions against Arsenal, absolutely need to be scrutinised, and they need to be, criticised for the mistakes they make. In the same way that Kai Havertz is in certain, he's in line for scrutiny when he misses opportunities and misses chances. But at no point is anybody able to, or rather not able, but at no point should anyone feel that it is, without a shadow of a doubt, appropriate to abuse anybody. So, yeah, I think Mikel Arteta is right to call out the abuse and right to speak about things in this certain way, because frankly, people are far, far too emboldened to say horrible things about anybody. Thanks to social media. And of course, recently we've seen that one of the individuals that was allegedly aiming that type of kind of rhetoric towards Kai Havertz and his wife is potentially facing consequences for that after they were arrested the other week. So hopefully that is the way forwards, and we continue to see consequences for these types of actions. Now we're going to move to part 2, which is going to be a little mini preview of tonight's game, and then we're going to go to the chat box and take some of your comments and questions right after this. So this is the situation where I see it tonight. Arsenal need to rotate as much as possible. We are very thin on the ground, which of course leans into that transfer debate and transfer discussion. From my perspective, there is of course some limitations to how much we can rotate. I think players like Trossard and Partey and Gabriel are the players that I would keep in the team, keep in the lineup for this game, as well as Ethan Nwaneri, of course, who moves to that right-hand side. Trossard takes over from Kai Havertz through the middle. Raheem Sterling plays on the left-hand side. A midfield 3 of Odegaard, Merino, and Jorginho is who, of course, was put into those 3. And then Partey, Kivior, Gabriel, and Calafiori, the back 4. Neto, I am giving a potential start and a debut in any competition, of course, for Arsenal. Could be in with a chance to play tonight. So let's wait and see what happens. It means resting Martinelli. It means resting Rice. It means resting Saliba. It means resting Raya, resting Lewis-Skelly. I feel like I'm forgetting somebody as well. But that is the best potential opportunity for me to give as many players a rest as we can. Are there other players that could play? I mean, the youth options, I think we still want to win. You want to keep that momentum up. You want to go into that game against Manchester City off the back of a victory. Yes, Timber, another player that I'm resting. Yes, we don't like seeing Partey at right back, but I think we have to give Timber a rest. He has just played so much football, and we don't have too many options at right back, of course, right now either. We could play Tierney. You could move Zinchenko into midfield. I think it's important that Odegaard plays, because he's just missed the last game at the weekend. You want to get him up firing and match fit ahead of the game against Manchester City. So I think that's the way forward. Kieran Tierney is, of course, going. He could be leaving in this January. He could be leaving in the summer. Calafiori is the guy that's going to be here for the long term. So play Calafiori and give him those minutes. Get him back up to speed after the injuries that he has indeed faced. But let's get some of your predictions for tonight's game. I think it's going to be an entertaining one. I think it's going to be an interesting one. The sense I get is not that Girona will be using this game kind of at the end as a big celebration of their time in the Champions League that's now come to an end. It's a little bit of a sadness, if you will, I think, from a Girona kind of perspective, because, there was a lot of expectation around getting into Europe and it being in the Champions League, and they've not managed to kind of progress. They've had some really tough fixtures. The draw did not do them kindly whatsoever. And they're going out of European competition as a result. And based upon their performances this season after the players that they've lost, Dovbyk, Alex Garcia, Savinho, of course, that was there last season. They've struggled. They've got some notable figures. They've got players that you will know. Donny van der Beek, of course, being a key one. Daley Blind. They've got Dan Juma. Players that, of course, you're aware of, David Lopez. So there are notable players in that team, but it is simply just not as competitive as it was before. And as a result, they are not very competitive in La Liga this season. And Michel, the manager, of course, has had to deal with that problem. Predictions-wise, in the chat box, 2-0 says Knowledge to Arsenal. Z says 2-1. David says 1-0 to the Arsenal. Bakary Azania says 1-0 to the Arsenal as well. We've got Brad says we win 2-0 or more tonight. Loga says Arsenal to win 2-0. Matt G says Arsenal to win 3-0. Alex says 3-0. First early goal, 2 goals scored late in the second half. Joe says 3-0 to the Arsenal as well. Nick, who's been a member now for 24 months, says put Tierney at left back and put Calafiori in the centre half position. Temi says 3-0 to Girona. Always going with the reverse psychology is Temi. Ken says a 4-0 win. Maximia says 2-1 to the Arsenal. NSW says 3-0 Girona. Pat says 3-1 Arsenal. Blackshine says 3-1. I assume to the Arsenal as well, and a few more predictions coming in tonight as well. I'm looking forward to it. Excited. It's the first kind of European away game. I know I did the Lens game last season away from home, but first game I really feel like I'm kind of ingrained in things and covering, and going to be doing the press conference, of course, afterwards as well. And yeah, I'm looking forward to it, and it should be a lot of fun. So let's wait and see what happens. And yesterday was exciting. Yesterday was fun. Girona's a really interesting city. I'm going to see more of it today, I hope, as well. But let's go to part 3 and your questions and more right after this. Okay, this is part 3 of today's show. We'll be jumping into the chat box and taking some of your questions. So if you've indeed got any that you would like to ask, now is the time to put those comments into the chat. Use a little capital Q, of course, or a big capital Q, and that will help you get the opportunity to ask those questions. I've really dry mouth this morning, so I'm going to be sipping on that water, although it's dwindling in volume as we speak. Anyway, let's go into the chat and tackle some of these questions. Tom says, what are your thoughts on Matthias Tell as an option? Is it a case of needs must? We need somebody. Like if it's just a loan, if you're going to sign a body, and there is a lot of talent, you know, in Matthias Tell, but he's not a particularly prolific goal scorer for Bayern. He's not played that many minutes, though. It's 253 minutes he's played for Bayern this season. He's not really played too much whatsoever. I think it's mostly to do with the fact that he's wanted to probably move on from Bayern. He scored 7 goals and got 5 assists in 30 Bundesliga matches in 1,000 minutes last season, which is pretty good. You know, it's a goal contribution every game, basically, is what that is, mostly coming off the bench. And when he started games, he started against Freiburg and scored. He started against Union Berlin and scored and assisted. He started against Hoffenheim on the last game of the season and scored and assisted. In the Champions League, he scored against Man United. He scored against Copenhagen. He has scored anywhere else? Has he played for? He's played for the kind of French under-19s and scored a couple of goals. So, yeah, I think Matthias Tell is better than signing nobody at the end of the window. But it's not the signing I think that we were looking for, is it? Forever an Arsenal fan says, what do you think of Chido and Heaven both going to Manchester United? Could it be for money, or they think they'll have a better chance of first-team football? I think there is definitely a financial element to it. There's a lot of discussion I think I've had with a few people about the Heaven thing, and it just doesn't really make too much sense to go to Manchester United in that position. I guess with Arsenal, there are 2 very key centre-halves in Saliba and Gabriel. Do you see yourself breaking into that team? Do you see yourself breaking into a team under Ruben Amorim that plays with 3 at the back? Maybe that's more of a kind of, there's more opportunities because they play with 3 centre-halves rather than 2. Maybe that's it. But I think there is a monetary idea to it that certainly I would imagine the same as Chido, of course, that gave that opportunity. You got a player like Waneri, of course, who was offered huge money elsewhere. Arsenal didn't and weren't able to kind of match that level of fee. And yet they managed to keep Ethan Waneri because his desire to stay at Arsenal was greater than the desire to earn a much, much higher wage somewhere else. So it matters to Arsenal, I think, to have players that want to stay more than they want to make ridiculous sums of money at a a very, very young age indeed. Alex is not sure if you've covered, but what are your thoughts on United getting another one? I think we've just done that. Of course, Martin says, Anthony, it's highly unlikely that RB would sell Sesko for 70 million during this window. Of course, this is in response to a lot of people asking the question specifically about, going to RB Leipzig. And Anthony says, we could have gotten Vlahovic for 33 million euros. And an out-and-out 9, but no, he wants Isak, who isn't leaving Newcastle, to slap the money down for Sesko. Anthony, I'm afraid you just don't really... That isn't the situation, at all. I mean, Arsenal could never have signed Vlahovic for 33 million euros when he was, of course, at Fiorentina. I think the fee was massive. His wages are also really, really big, Vlahovic. And he's not necessarily kind of the obvious candidate for Arsenal to take forward. There is a lot of question marks about Vlahovic. I mean, his non-penalty goals per 90, he's in the 30th percentile for centre forwards. That's not a good return at all. It's not. He's not better than Kai Havertz, Vlahovic, for me. He's not an improvement. He's not the guy that's going to take Arsenal to that next level. He's now, how old is Dusan Vlahovic? He's 20. He's 25. So at 25, he's not producing what maybe we thought he would produce. You look at somebody like Sesko, who Arsenal do like, but the reality of Arsenal being able to do that deal this January, RB Leipzig are not entertaining negotiations at all. They do not want to sell. They do not want to sell. And that's the problem that Arsenal have got, is that if RB Leipzig do not want to sell other than for a absolutely ridiculous fee, then for Arsenal, it's a case of we can't do that because we want to approach the market in a self-sustaining way. And that's the issue, I think, that's where you have to have the conversation about kind of Arsenal and the ownership. And it's not Arteta. Arteta would love to sign a striker. He could not have been more outspoken on the idea of signing a striker. He could not have been more committal in suggesting what he wants for this team. But Arsenal, from an ownership standpoint, it's quite obvious that we want to approach things in a self-sustaining way. That Arsenal want to move towards the model that Liverpool have, of course, and they haven't been doing that over recent seasons. Arsenal have not been approaching things in a self-sustaining way at all. Arsenal have made huge losses. They've outspent their revenue in terms of player sales by huge numbers over these last 5 seasons, getting them back into a position where they're now competing for titles, where they have a squad that is capable of competing for titles, and they want to be in a position where they are self-sustaining. And there is also the UEFA FFP element, which at the moment, because Arsenal haven't been self-sustaining over the last however many seasons, that they sit here right now in a position where if RB Leipzig say, we want you to pay 15, 20 million over what his market price would be in the summer, they're not going to be willing to do that. They're not going to drop. And RM says, why won't the board drop 70 to 80 million on Sesko now, chuck his agent 5 million, offer the kid £200,000 per week and apply pressure like a big club? Well, the irony is about the whole big club thing is that look at the team that are top of the Premier League table right now. Look at the team that are sitting pretty and are several points ahead of us with a game in hand. It's Liverpool, a team with a self-sustaining model, a team that are frustrating their fans this January by not making signings, that in the summer only added Chiesa to their squad. And as a result, despite not making those signings, of course, and needing a defensive midfielder and needing depth at centre-half and potentially needing depth at right-back as well, they sit top of the table. And when you've got an example like that, it's very hard to justify from a club perspective, to do something else. And, I'm from a perspective that I want Arsenal to have a self-sustaining model? Frankly, I just want Arsenal to win titles. I just want Arsenal to win things. I want Arsenal to be as competitive as feasibly possible. I don't want Arsenal to do whatever they can to be able to make that happen. Now, we're not in there. We don't know how close Arsenal specifically are to kind of those restrictions. We don't know how close Arsenal are to breaching UEFA FFP. We know that it certainly is a factor because of what Arsenal have spent in recent seasons and in kind of addition to what they've been able to make in terms of player sales, which if you look at a club like Chelsea, has been nowhere close whatsoever in terms of player sales. And that's something that needed to change in the summer. And that's why when people complain, why did we sell Smith Rowe? Why did we sell Nketiah? It's because we have been overspending in terms of our expenditure over our player sales for year after year after year. Brian says, no excuses, Tom. We need attackers. We have room to buy with PS. We don't have room to buy with UEFA FFP, though, Brian. And as well, I am told that PSR piece by Swiss Ramble was not entirely a fair representation of Arsenal's situation. So the whole no excuses thing, I get it. I empathise with your frustrations. I really do. But Arsenal, I'm telling you, from what I'm hearing, Arsenal are not very likely to drop a massive fee down on a Sesko during this window because they don't believe him to be at the moment worth that amount of money. And it breaks their structure of what they want to move towards, that self-sustaining model. And that's the reality. We can have a debate all day long about whether Arsenal should have a self-sustaining model. But in the reality of the sport, which is that teams are potentially facing punishments for breaching financial restrictions, that's the way Arsenal want to go. And not only that, but Arsenal, of course, have spent huge sums in recent years, breaking records in terms of spending on Rice, and of course, not only Rice, but Havertz and Timber in that same window as Raya came in on loan. They still spent more than they made on players last summer, with 100 million spent on players and around 90 million coming in. But if you look at the previous summers, in terms of what Arsenal have spent, in terms of what Arsenal have made, it's absolutely night and day in terms of what the investment has been in comparison to what the revenue in terms of player sales has been. If you go back to 2023, Declan Rice, Havertz, Timber, Raya on loan, 235 million euros according to Transfermarkt. They sold Balogun, they sold Xhaka, they sold Turner, Marie, Trusty, and a few others, and made around 70 million euros. The season before that, Arsenal spent 186 million euros on Gabriel Jesus, on Fabio Vieira, Alexander Zinchenko, Trossard, Kivior, Jorginho, Turner, Marquinhos, 186 million euros. They made 23 million euros. With Guendouzi, Torreira, Leno, Mavropanos, Bella, and Lacazette, those two leaving for free. Season before that, Ben White, Odegaard, Ramsdale, Tomiyasu, Lokonga, Tavares, 167 million euros. They made 31 million euros. Joe Willock was the main sale that season. Season before that, in 2020, Thomas Partey, Gabriel Magalhaes, Willian, Cedric, Runarsson, 86 million euros spent. Amount made, 19 million euros. Emi Martinez going out the door. Season before that, 1920, Nicolas Pepe, William Saliba, Kieran Tierney, David Luiz, Pablo Mari, Gabriel Martinelli. 160 million euros spent, 53 million euros made on Iwobi, Bielik, Koscielny, Ospina. I can keep going because I can go to 18-19. It was a 70 million net spend. 17-18 was the last time Arsenal made profit in a window. Aubameyang, Lacazette, Mkhitaryan and Mavropanos were signed across 2 windows. Oxlade-Chamberlain, Alexis Sanchez, Theo Walcott, Wojciech Szczesny, Olivier Giroud, Francis Coquelin, Gabriel Paulista, Kieran Gibbs, Mathieu Debuchy, all left and made a 10 million euro net profit according to Transfermarkt. But you go back again to 16-17, 100 million euro net loss. 15-16, 20 million euro net loss. 14-15, around 100 million net loss. 13-14, around 38 million euro net loss. That's been the story, that Arsenal have made more, have spent far more than they have made on players. That's it. And Mark says, Tom, it's disingenuous, with all respect. How much revenue did the club make? The revenue that the club makes also is spent in other areas. Arsenal's expenditure doesn't only go on, Mark, what we spend in the transfer market, with respect. That's not what Arsenal's revenue just goes on. It goes on player wages, of course, on top of that, running of the club in general. So revenue is not just to do with transfers, but what it is a lot to do with, and of course what Arsenal's expenditure is on, is wages and transfer fees take up a huge proportion of that expenditure. A massive, massive thing. And Franklin's like, it's all excuses. There is no reason not to spend anything. And that's not true. We know it's not true. We know that the idea of there is no reason not to spend anything, because the answer to that is that if indeed the player we feel is not there that is good enough, or that if the player is there that we think is good enough, but the fee that is being asked specifically to join the club is being put up at this huge price tag, how can you justify that huge extra expenditure when you are wanting to approach a self-sustaining model? I don't mind throwing I've got free time this morning. I'm happy to have a conversation with people if they want to. I'm happy to hear your views, hear your frustrations. If you want, I'll just throw the link into the chat now. It's right there. I can't say I'll be able to talk to everybody, so no one lose their heads if you don't come on, because I'm limited for a certain amount of time. But shall we go to a part 2? I'll run and get a drink of water, if I can do it in time, and invite some of you on the show for part 4 of today's show, if you'd like to voice some of your feelings about how Arsenal are right now. So let's see if I can fill up a glass in 12 seconds right after this. We were close. We were very close. I think that was pretty good, to be fair. Managed to get back in just in time, because I was struggling there for a second. Maybe actually letting other people speak would be good. But I particularly want to hear from people that I don't really want to hear I want to hear from the people that are frustrated. I want to hear from people that are saying about the excuses. I want to hear from you. Franklin, I want to hear from you. I want to hear from you guys. I'd love to kind of, if you've got questions, I'm happy to answer them to the best of my ability. But the opportunity for you to speak is always there. We do that. Bobby's up first. Let's get him on the show. I sense that Bobby's not going to be as frustrated as others in the chat from our previous convos. But Bobby, talk to me, mate.
Hi, Tom. How you doing? You okay?
Yeah, not bad, mate. You?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. I think for me, I don't see it as too much of a frustrating window, because sometimes there just isn't opportunities there. So, for example, I wanted to buy a house during COVID. I couldn't do it. Simple as that. You know what I mean? There wasn't the means to do it. The houses I was looking for weren't on the market, and you could either buy something that's not fit for purpose for the next few years, just for the sake of purchasing it. I think that's what relates to this market as well. And you've got to look around, and people could say the Mamouche signing and stuff like that. I don't think it really transfers. I think, unfortunately, we've been hit with a lot of injuries, which have been unprecedented. I agree with you in terms of you've got to. It's not a case of finding someone who's an upgrade on Havertz. It's about somebody that gives you an alternative opinion going into the last few weeks. Havertz is dead. I don't want to use the word dead, but he's
no, but I know what you mean. Yeah, fitness-wise, he's dead.
Yeah, and he's put in so much work, and I think people don't realise that we're looking for a specific profile of player. And if we go into the summer now, and for example, if we were to sign a Isak, Zubimendi comes, this is going to be the biggest summer that Arsenal are going to have within the next 10 years. I'll be honest with you. I think this is comparable to the Rice summer in terms of it looks like Zubimendi's done. It looks like a wing. If we turn around, we've got Zubimendi, Williams, Sesko, and we've lost the likes of Zinchenko and a couple of others that were fringe players, and we've got some more youth coming in. That's a good progression of the club going forward, if that makes sense. And yeah, it's short-term pain at the minute, and people can turn around and say, pay for Sesko, pay for Duran, pay for people. The point is, there's no guarantees that Sesko's going to gel in straight away.
Yeah.
He's not got a pre-season going in. I like the look of him, but I think just a bit of patience, and who knows, if we've got Saka back towards the end of March, it's only a few weeks away.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I get the perspective, right? I do. I know that people are very frustrated about the spending, and obviously they see the squad, how thin it is right now, and the need to do something.
What is there to be done? I don't get what there is to be done.
Well, I think they have to bring in a forward, don't they? They cannot go to the end of this season with just Havertz and Trossard. It would be mad to do that.
Ethan's back now.
Yeah, but I'm talking about centre forward figures. I'm talking about players that can play, because, as you said, Havertz is dead. From a fitness perspective, he is done. He was at the end of that Wolves game and he collapsed at the end of it. And the likelihood is that with Arsenal going through in this competition, we're going to be playing, midweek matches for the majority of the rest of the campaign. You would hope, if we can get through. And the Champions League's a great opportunity for us as well this season. I just cannot see how Arsenal will win a trophy this season, which is not, it should never be anything we're entitled to, and that's not what I'm saying. If we're talking about Arsenal putting us in the best possible situation to win something, whether it's a loan or a short-term deal for somebody, we can't finish this window without having brought anybody in.
So, for example, there's not. Okay, I was a big fan of the Sterling signing, and for whatever reason, it's not worked out so far. There's still games left to the season, so I think anybody writing that off as a signing, it could be a valuable squad player for certain games. Like, for example, today, if you didn't have Sterling, you'd be placing somebody in another position. But I think you've got to sometimes, if there is a player available that adds to the squad, I think we'd go for them. I generally do. I don't think people can turn around and say short-term signings. The Evan Ferguson, he wanted to link up with Graham Potter again. It's looking like that he could go to Leverkusen. We've already got 2 players that are loaned from the Premier League. So that's not a possibility. Who else are you going to bring in? I just think it's very.
Yeah, no, that's the question. Of course, that's the question. Who is you going to bring in? I'd go to Bayern and say, what's the situation with Matthias Tell? I'd be doing that on a 6-month loan deal with an option. I'm not committing. I don't want to commit to a potential permanent move. And if obviously a club like Chelsea come in and are willing to do that, then of course I'd take my hat out of the ring, because I don't think I would want to do a permanent move for Matthias Tell, for example. I just want to raise this point by Clive in the chat box as well. He says the market will change after tonight. Clubs will know their European positions. Budgets will be set out and future planning can start as well. So, yeah, and it's worth pointing out that, I was talking to Simon Collins last night and he pointed out, it's getting through to the last 16 of the competition is an extra 9 odd million quid you get guaranteed, so that might change things a little bit. But yeah, let's wait and see.
I think we should just be a bit more optimistic. We're in a really good position in the Champions League. That if you look at the clubs that we could potentially face, it could be a very optimistic tournament. This, and I think we stand in good stead. Obviously, I get how everyone's upset, but the reality is we've had the most horrid season in terms of injuries and refereeing decisions, and by no means does that condone any abuse at all. But I think that's I think it's just that you could do that to any team in the Premier League. If you did that to, if you twinned Man City's injury fortunes with poor refereeing decisions, where would they be? And
yeah, I think it's a conversation for a different day, Bobby, in terms of kind of the why we are where we are. I think we are better than the points tally that we have. I think we deserve more this season than we've got so far. But I think in terms of if Arsenal want to win something this season, it's very, very hard to see that happening if we don't add somebody.
And I'd be very surprised if we didn't try and sign someone. And I think by the end of this window, I think people will be gently surprised, whether that's a loan signing or somebody.
I'll get you back on after deadline day, and we can have a chat.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, of course. I know you would. Bobby, it's been a pleasure, mate. Thank you for hopping on.
Take care. All the best, everyone.
Take care, mate. Have a good day. Lovely stuff. Let's get King on next. How you doing, mate? You good? You well?
Yeah, I'm good, Tom. How you doing?
Yeah, good. Thank you, mate. You?
Yeah, just a bit frustrated with Arsenal's transfers or lack of transfers during the January window. But I think it goes back a bit. And I think we always talk about buying players is a risk. But we also don't talk about not buying players is also a risk. So I'll give you an example. It could be was it 2 or 3 windows ago where we had the opportunity to buy Isak. We were interested in Vlahovic, but we got none of them. And today
we got Jesus.
Yeah, we got Jesus in the summer, but in the January window, you remember when
Vlahovic was the story. Yeah, that was the main one. Isak wasn't really. He was mentioned as a player that was liked, but it was never any kind of.
We deemed he was too expensive, basically.
Yeah. For his injury record on that, they deemed it not.
Exactly. And you look at Isak today, and he's 100+ million player, probably 120 million minimum you will have to pay. So he's almost doubled his value over a 2-year period.
Yeah,
and it would be an excellent asset for us now. But we didn't get it. and that can happen. But the problem we have now is that we have a shortage of attacking options. Either if you look at the number 8-10 role, or if you look at the center forward role, or even if you look at right winger role. And the fact that we did not do anything during the summer has kind of come back and bite us. And for as stable and as successful we've been in the past few years, I think getting Sterling on loan was a mistake. Like we should not, as attractive as
If we
Arsenal are.
didn't do that, King, hypothetically, if
Yeah,
Arsenal hadn't have signed Sterling on loan on deadline day, which, by the way, was a deadline day thing, that they didn't
yeah,
enter the summer transfer window going, we're going to try and sign Sterling. It was a case of
yeah,
it reached the last hours of the window.
yeah.
Chelsea produced a situation
Opportunity.
financially that was viewed as kind of too good to be true in terms of
Yeah,
what they were willing to accept to send Sterling on loan. And the club were like, well, we're not going to sign anybody else this window.
yeah,
Let's just do it. So
yeah. But that's the
I agree.
problem.
I agree
Like
that it's a
we,
mistake, but
yeah,
it was a case of him or no one. Do you know what I mean?
yeah. No, I understand that. But the problem I have is that we should never sign just bodies, right? So
Yeah, 100%.
we have a clear structure. We have certain requirements that we look at. We look at data. We look at age, profile on and off the field. And Sterling did not get into that bracket.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
only reason why we got him is because we failed to get any other target that is in our bracket. And we can see now the outcome is that it was a risk and it's definitely not paid out. He's been very poor and not very available. He's been so poor that he barely get minutes for us, even when we have a lot of injuries
Yeah,
and he's
yeah, yeah.
available. So that's a bit sad. And then now, when you look at the January window, there was possibilities for players that we could have bought, but we didn't. And now we are at the end again, and we are over relying on players like I have it, where he doesn't get any rest. He has to play because we don't have any options. And still, we haven't managed to get anyone in. And it's unfair on the squad, it's unfair on the manager. And here is where my criticism comes to Edu, where he didn't do enough in the summer window and he decides to leave the project,
Yeah.
not like Tixi did for Man City, where he comes out and, you know what, in the summer, I'm planning to leave. You give Arsenal enough time to find a
Yeah, he just
replacement.
resigns the mid-season. Yeah.
Yeah, but he just resigns in the mid-season, whereas you had a summer where you didn't do enough.
Yeah.
And it's caused issues because
Yeah.
Edu is someone who the club has relied on a lot to talk to players, to convince them to sell the pitch, to get on the
For the
Arsenal.
record, Edu leaving does not change Arsenal's financial situation this January. It's worth pointing out. Like, it has nothing to do with if Leipzig want a huge sum of money.
Yeah, yeah,
Edu being here
100%.
or not doesn't change that.
No, it doesn't change that. But his negotiation skills, his kind of aura out there, and all the connection that he has is gone for us, and it doesn't help. And then you put Jason in a funny situation where he has to do a role that's not his role, and you put Arteta in where he has to take more in charge, where he doesn't even have that time really, because he has to stress about the squad and the players. So I have a big criticism towards the way Edu left us, and I think it was wrong of him to do it in that way he did. But now we are in this situation where we need players, Tom, and if we don't get players in, the risk are that others will also get injured, and that will get even worse. Because if I told you that come the weekend, Havertz plays, he gets a hamstring, no one would be surprised because he's played too many minutes.
Yeah,
It's similar
as
to
have so many of our players. There's a lot.
yeah,
Of
like Bukayo is another one where we are not surprised that eventually he got injured
Yeah.
because he's played so many minutes for so many years consistently for England and for Arsenal. But the problem that we've had is that we never found a solution where we could rest him more.
Yeah.
Because
Which I'm
we
not
haven't
surprised
bought,
by, to be honest. Like, I'm not surprised we never found the solution to the Saka issue, because finding a player that can be the number 2 to Bukayo Saka and give you the requisite amount of quality is nigh on impossible. And that's why when you look at Liverpool, they don't have a natural number 2 to Mohamed Salah. It's why when you look at City, they don't have a natural number 2 to Rodri. And so when they lose those players, or when Spurs lost Harry Kane or someone like that, the drop-off was always massive, because finding a player that's going to be the deputy to your talismanic world star that starts the majority of all your games, and finding a player that gives you that level of quality needed to do that is really hard. Now, what Liverpool have got is they've got a lot of centre forward and left wing options that when Salah is out, they'll shoehorn one of those into the right-hand side and they'll do a job. It won't be as good as what they do through the middle or on the left, but they'll do a job. And with City, they've lost Rodri. I mean, I really think that people, you look at the injury record of Arsenal this season, it's atrocious. City have lost Rodri for pretty much all this season, and then Diaz has been the other key figure that's been kind of missing as well. But we know the depth of quality that they've got in the centre-half position anyway. Their drop-off compared to Arsenal's comparative drop-off, which is still nowhere near as bad as City's has been this season, despite Arsenal dealing with far more than City has, I think is rather telling. Whereas Liverpool, for instance, who have had nigh on a very clean record, the players that they have lost being Alisson, they've got a very good backup in Keller, of course, but everybody else, Salah's been fit, their forward line have all been fit, Van Dijk's been fit,
Jota's been injured. But
Jota's been out, but he's not a starter for them in most games. It's going to be either Nunez, Gakpo, Diaz, and Salah. Jota is a very good player, but it's going to be those.
I would argue that he's ahead of Nunez, but anyway, my point is more
100 million euros are spent on Nunez, by the way.
Yeah, but Nunez is a player that obviously is not lived up to what they paid for, not even close. But my point is more to that when you have a situation, when you have someone like Bukayo, that's when you need to look at someone like a Jota or like a Lookman who can basically play through the line of the forward option. Of course, Lookman is not as good as Bukayo Saka, but he's definitely better than Sterling. And he's definitely
sure. That's not a high bar, to be fair.
Yeah. But
also,
that's
you've got to think about
have.
Waneri here, though, King, because you look at Waneri, for instance. Waneri's come through at this point in the summer, and they're looking at that pathway and thinking, well, his best positions are either playing as an attacking midfielder or playing on the right. Now, Arsenal's 2 most key figures that start pretty much every single game are in those 2 positions. And so if Waneri's going to get minutes, if we sign somebody that's like a Brian Mbeumo, for instance, and try and find that backup option to Saka, is Waneri going to get the amount of minutes that he needs to play? The answer is probably no.
I'll say yes. I say, do you know why I will say yes? Let's go back a few years and look at Man City. We look at Phil Foden, for example, exceptional talent, but he has Kevin De Bruyne, David Silva, Bernardo Silva, Gundogan as attacking options, and then on wings he has Leroy Sané, Gabriel Jesus, Raheem Sterling. So there's not a clear pathway for him. But when you're good enough talent, like an Eaton, like an Foden, you will force yourself into the team, because when you are playing every 3 days, you need to rotate the squad. So Odegaard can't play every game. Saka can't play every game. Even if Mbeumo can, he can't play every game. So you will have games where Eaton will play as a number 8 or number 10. And then you will have other games where he will play as right wing, and then you will other games where he will be subbed in. You know, that's how you rotate
Yeah,
and keep your squad.
I'm not sure. I'll be honest with you, King. I'm not sure. Like, I'm not sure whether or not, because a player like Lookman, I'd love to see signed, right? But
Yeah,
he's not. I don't know why he's going to come to sit on our bench. Like, you've got Martinelli, you've got Trossard. Is he going to look at a move to Arsenal, which, by the way, is going to take up all your budget for a
but he's
striker?
injured now. He's injured now, so he's not an option anymore.
Right,
I think,
but what I'm saying is that Lookman's probably going to cost what we'd want to spend on a striker, right? And we know that Arsenal have got this model that is looking at trying to be as self-sustaining as possible after years of making huge loss after huge loss after huge loss. And now, if you're going to spend big money on a forward, it's got to be a centre forward for me. Like, it has to be on a centre forward, because you've got, as you mentioned, Waneri coming through. You've got this player potentially in the ranks who could be one of our forward options, like Foden was for Manchester City, on top of what is already there in Saka and Trossard and Martinelli. And if we're going to spend big money, and we probably only got the capacity to spend big money on one forward, especially with the money that we might spend on Zubimendi in the summer with Jorginho and Partey leaving for free in the summer, we're going to have to spend that on a centre forward. We're going to have to spend that on a centre forward.
Yeah, but I'm not. I'm gonna be honest with you, Tom. I'm not totally convinced with Sesko.
No, I'm not totally convinced either, but I don't know who else is a better option, mate, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it's a hard one, because the club is obviously not sold on Gyökeres.
No,
otherwise we would have bought him by now.
Yeah,
or
I
we
think
would
another
have
elite team
stronger links.
would have bought him by now.
We would have had stronger links towards him, but we're just not convinced about him. I don't think Vlahovic is better than Trossard even as a centre forward. I don't think he's any good. And I think
he's not better than
why...
what we've got, Vlahovic. No,
he's not. He's not. So,
and that shows you what a bullet we kind of dodged as well. You think about that deal. You know, people go, "Oh, we should have signed Isak back then," but a lot of people were calling as vehemently for Vlahovic. And, you know, say if you drop 150 million now on Isak, what if he was to get injured tomorrow? Because we know he has got an injury in him. You drop 150 million on a guy that has got a record of injuries.
But maybe I'm biased because I've followed Isak since he was in Sweden as a kid. So I've seen him when he made his debut. I've seen him live many times. So for me, I was always convinced that he was the right player, even 2-3 years ago when he had that, had a period where he didn't score a lot of goals. I think it was one season where he scored less than 10 goals for Sociedad. And I think that's when we were linked to him. But other than that, his trajectory has been upwards. And for me, he's worth the risk. I can only speak for me. I understand people being hesitant to play that. But the reason why I think he's worth the risk is because Isak is one of very few players out there that you can buy and he can be transformative to the club, because I believe he has that X factor. He has the world-class ability. He can win you games on his own, but he's also a player who links up, who does the hold-up, who creates, and he's very explosive, and he can score from outside the box. Like, he has all the attributes that you want in a centre forward.
He has all of the attributes, mate. But the boat, and I agree. Like, I'd
if I told you this tomorrow,
like,
would you sell Havertz for 50 million and buy Isak for 150? Would you do that?
Sell Havertz for 50 and buy Isak for 150? Yeah, I would, because I think he's the only striker on the market that is potentially like the most of a guarantee when it comes to that position. He's the most of a guarantee. So if you're saying to me that Isak costs you 100 million quid, but you have to let Havertz go for free to get it done, you'd argue, I think you probably have to, because do you see any other player, either now or potentially coming through the ranks in the future, that is going to get you what Isak is going to get Arsenal? I think you can replace Havertz to a degree. It's going to be hard. It might not happen immediately, and we may have to go into the market again and bring in somebody on loan. But you see, I'm talking through myself with this, King, and I mean, even now as I'm saying it, I'm coming up with doubts in my mind about the idea of it, because if you were to let go of Havertz to bring in Isak, you've not solved our problem. That's not solving our problem, is it? Because our problem right now is that we don't have a centre forward that takes Arsenal to the next level right now. Havertz is a good player. Oh, King's gone. He didn't like that opinion, clearly. I think he's just disconnected. I'll keep talking for the moment while we get King back. But you've got Havertz, who is a good player, a very good player. He's got a goal contribution record around 1 in 2. This season, he's on for a 20-plus goal season. You don't do that if you're not a good player. He's a good player, but he's not world-class, Kai Havertz. He's not a world-class centre-forward. He's a very good option for a team like Arsenal, but on his own, he's not going to be good enough. So Arsenal have to go and find that guy. Now, I'm not sure that replacing Havertz with that guy is the answer, but I certainly think that adding that key figure to the current squad that we've got is the best way forwards. Now, I'm actually going to go back, and it shows you that why we've got minds, and you've got entitlement to change your mind in a very short space of time, because I think that actually I will change your mind. I don't think I would swap Havertz and spend 100 million by letting Havertz go through on this. I don't think that actually solves our problem. I think I fell into that trap actually a second ago of the shiny new toy and thinking it's the answer to all our problems. Does it really change our problem? I think Isak and Havertz, you've got a great couple of options at centre forward. Just Isak, just Havertz, I don't think it's enough. King, thank you so much. He said his phone's died in the chat box, so he won't be joining us back. Tommy, if Tommy's going to be able to sit somewhere just to stay still for a second, we're going to get Tom in. 1 second, he says. Tommy says 1 second. He'll be on. We'll get Anthony on first quick and speak to Anthony quick, and then we'll get Tommy on. Anthony, mate, take yourself off. There we go. How you doing, mate? You all right?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you, Tom. How are you?
Yeah, not bad. I'm going to try and keep these calls a little bit quicker, mate, so don't be angry if I cut you off.
No.
I've got to go enjoy the city of Girona, mate, and I'm running out of time. So,
where to begin?
Well, let me ask you. I don't want this to be kind of a ramble, really. I want this to kind of be very pointed.
Yeah.
Arsenal are, as we've gone through, periods of making losses after losses after losses.
Yeah.
In that time of doing that, they have built a team that has taken them under Arteta back into a title race for the first time in more than 1.5 decades and look like they have established themselves there. It's not a case of a false dawn. We've been there for 2 seasons and we're aiming to be there again this season, and the aim will be there again next season to do that. They are looking now at what they have spent and looking at it and going, we cannot continue to do this of just spending way more money than what we are making because it's not sustainable. So when it comes to the business, they want to spend of a level that they can cope with and not go close to breaching any either PSR or UEFA FFP. And so if a player like Sesko is the main key figure we know that Arteta likes and the club likes, Leipzig in January are turning around and saying, we don't want to sell him. And if you want to buy him, you've got to put up a stupid amount of money to get him through the door. And Arsenal are going to go, no, we're going to wait for the summer and we're going to try and sign either Sesko or a comparative option then. In the chat box, Anthony, I'm told that shows we've got no ambition. So where do I have to sit on this?
The reason I say that they're showing their ambition, because if you look what's happened, Saka's gone, Jesus is out for, you might say, until next season. Havertz gets injured because Havertz looks knackered. He looks completely knackered. If Havertz goes down, we're going to play Trossard through the middle. At
the moment, because Jesus is out for a year.
Yeah. You play Trossard through the middle, but you're still taking that element away from the wing and going forward. You're still taking that element. When I say about no ambition, it's a case that we, the fans, we've heard this story before. Oh, let's go bigger than summer. It's the same cycle over and over again. We can't buy players. There's no market opportunities. There is. Boniface has gone to Algeria. He's another one. He's gone. There are players. There? I don't know how much. I think they're paying him stupid money in terms of wages. But if he came to, hypothetically speaking, if he came to us, I don't think he'll be on any.
Is Boniface, with all due respect, the guy that takes Arsenal to the title? I don't know.
Well, he took Bayer Leverkusen. Well, he and the rest took Bayer Leverkusen to the title last season.
It wasn't just him though. He had a very good season.
I know it wasn't just him. It was the whole team. As a whole. Took Bayer Leverkusen to them. But I'm just using it as an example. Vlahovic, I understand in terms of the wages. That's another key. He hasn't hit the heights from since Fiorentina. But you have to look at the circumstances. We've got about 7-8 players leaving in the summer.
Yeah,
this club are not going to do 7 to 8 players. They're going to miss out on targets. Not all of the top. If Arsenal do keep some of the players, great. If not, we're going to be in the same situation come January, then come the summer. It's going to be another cycle, Tom. And I think fans are now.
You look back at 2 years ago, though.
Yeah.
Right. So we're saying that this is like a cycle, and this is what Arsenal do, and this is all they do. You go back to 2023. I mean, we in that summer spent 105 million on Declan Rice, 65 million on Havertz, 35 to 40 million on Timber, and brought in Raya on loan. Like if we were saying in the January of 2023, like the summer's going to be huge, and it was huge for us. So it can't always be that we always have this threat of a really big transfer coming around or a really big window coming, because we do have these big windows. The summer before that, it was Jesus, Vieira, Zinchenko, Trossard, Kvyat, Jorginho in that season, and Arsenal ended up spending well over 150 million on players. The season before that, White, Ødegaard, Ramsdale, Tomiyasu, like we do spend money. Like it's this idea of like the cycle. These last 5 years have been about Arsenal building and building and building and building. In 2023, they managed to go into the market and spend a record-breaking number on not just single players, but obviously on the window as a whole. Yeah. So there's clearly Arsenal have shown that ambition to spend huge money on the squad over these last 5 years. And the issue that I've got, Anthony, with this whole ambition thing, and we're always told X, Y, Z, and we have a reason for sure. I want Arsenal to go and buy the guy. I'm not sitting here trying to make excuses. I'm trying to make sense of why there is a struggle to look at what we've done and look at where we are right now, which is far better than we were 5 years ago, far better than we were 3 years ago, and see where we are and think, well, if they're not convinced that the player is there to take us that next level, and if they're not able, because they're looking at the losses that we've made getting here, to go big on a player in January, how can we sit here and say that there therefore is no ambition at all?
Because you have to look at it this way. From what it standpoints from outside looking in, from what David Ornstein saying, the apple in the eye is Isaac.
Yes,
that's gone. That is, for me, that's gone.
But he's not wrong though, is he, when he says that?
No, he's not wrong. But again, if he's your person that you're looking to get, okay, what's your plan B? What's your plan C? And the way that it is now, depending on how much games we got left, Champions League, people are going to look back on it and said, another missed opportunity. I remember the time when we were challenging for top 4. Remember the season when we didn't buy players, but Spurs did, and Spurs picked us.
El Neni, was it the El Neni Czech summer? Was it
El Neni Czech summer? The summer that we were supposed to get top 4 and we lost against.
Oh, sorry. The 20 was that the 21-22 season, the Amazon season.
Yeah.
So we didn't sign anybody in January that season.
Yeah, we did exactly. And we missed out on top.
Left.
Yeah. And then when Spurs bought their players, like Kulusevski and Bentancur, they pipped us going forward.
Yeah.
This season, this has been the poor, City's been poor. This is, we haven't seen City like this. Who would have thought that they would have lost Rodri? This would have been our time to shine going forward. We were close. And
we've also lost comparable players to Rodri, though.
Yeah, I know. And this is the thing. Injuries haven't helped, but the summer window, like the other person was saying, it has come back to bite us. It's literally come back to bite us in us. If Klopp wins, the Premier League,
Slot.
A load of Arsenal fans, Slot wins the Premier League. A load of Arsenal fans going to be losing their minds that he's coming.
Yeah,
he's done what he's done with the team. And let's be honest, Liverpool right now, they got a better attack than Arsenal. Like,
who did they sign in the summer that's took them to the title?
I think, they've got, like you said, centre forwards. They've got Salah. They've got Jota who can come on. They've got Nunes. They've got Gakpo. They've got Chiesa. They've got Diaz. You look at the abundance of attacking options that they have. Are majority of them better than Arsenal's attackers? Yes. Is Salah better than Saka? That is debatable.
Well, no, again, he is. There's not a debate. Salah is better than Saka.
He is, but they still have options that they can bring off the bench. If you look at Arsenal's bench, all we have is 4 left backs, 2 goalkeepers. No one that can come on to change the game. If Havertz is knackered, who's going to come on? Sterling looks like a shadow.
Let me put this point to you, though, Anthony. Right. So Arsenal are currently without Saka, Jesus, and Saka and Jesus. They are the forwards that are missing, right, at the moment. We've had Waneri out for the majority of January as well, because obviously he suffered that injury. So let's look at that in comparison to Liverpool's attackers. Let's say that Saka is comparable in the sense, just in terms of position, I'm not talking about quality, just in place in the squad. You've got Saka and Salah, right? You've got Havertz and Jota. You've got Jesus and Nunez. You've got Diaz and Martinelli, and you've got Gakpo and Trossard. They're your 5, right? And then you've got Sterling and Chiesa. So numbers-wise, we have the same number of attacking players as they do. And if Liverpool were to lose their Saka, which is Salah, and if they were to lose their Jesus, which we say is Nunez or Jota, and if they were to lose their Waneri, which is their Harvey Elliott, I guess, you could argue it as an option there, then what they've got is the same number. So they would have on their bench Kids and Chiesa, the same as us. If they were to lose the same comparable figures as we have this season and have lost right now, it would be Gakpo and Salah and Diaz as their front 3, because Jota's gone and Elliott's gone, and they're left with their Chiesa, who's barely been fit as well this season. So that's the reality, is that Arsenal have lost key figures in their attack this season and still sit second in the league. And yes, I get the idea that if you look at the situation of the summer, and we absolutely wanted to sign a Sesko, or we wanted to sign a Williams, we wanted to do those deals, but they couldn't materialize. They didn't materialize for reasons outside of our control, not within our control. And for that reason, we decided to not go for anybody else, because we felt as though that the options that were alternatives to them were not good enough, or were not to what our standards are. And on the panic of deadline day, an option came up in Sterling that we went and got. Now, when it comes to January, again, Arteta could not be more committal and outspoken in what he wants. He wants us to sign a striker. He wants us to sign a player. He wants us to get that player. But if the player isn't there, or if the player isn't feasible for us to do, they're not going to do it. And they're not going to compromise on that quality.
But then it just goes to show that, no, I understand what you're saying with that aspect. But there's still opportunities out there. And that's the thing, is like, there are opportunities out there. If this guy from Bayern Munich,
who's good enough that's going to get into Liverpool's team that's available, Anthony?
Who's good enough?
Because that's got to be the target, right?
Yeah.
Who is good enough on the market that is going to get into Liverpool's starting 11?
There's what's his name? Who's at PSG? Who's people's raving about?
Barcola.
Yeah.
It's not available. PSG don't want to sell it. It was a made-up story by Arsenal socials.
Do we know that?
Yeah, we do. We do know that. It was completely. Why would PSG want to let go of one of their most prized assets?
Because they have bought in Lewis-Skelly, who is arguably better than Barcola.
You just said that teams need depth in these attacking options. They don't have much depth on the left. They have Barcola. They want to get rid of Asensio because he's the other option they have there. Why would PSG do what you think Arsenal shouldn't do, which is to have little depth in those attacking areas?
Well, who would have thought they would have got rid of Kolo Muani?
Well, he was terrible. They spent 80 million euros on him, and he barely did anything for them. So,
Yeah, but who would have thought?
I didn't think they'd get rid of him after they signed him for 8 million.
All
But
right,
he's been awful, and they've let him go. And you could argue that they've replaced him with Kvaratskhelia, have they not?
Well, one's a striker, one's a winger, but
No, but he's an attacking option, isn't he?
Yeah.
In terms of attacking options, as we're talking about, they've let Muani go and they've brought in Kvaratskhelia. Barcola can play on the left, and I think he's probably played on the right as well. So when you're looking at, and Kvaratskhelia can also play through the middle and has done for Georgia many times. So when you're looking at those, it's been a 1 out, 1 in situation with PSG this winter. I'm not trying to goad you, Danson. You know, I mean absolutely well with you.
Yeah.
What I'm just saying, I'm just trying to get into my head this idea, because there's a lot of people that are very angry and very frustrated and annoyed about Arsenal's approach this window, and I empathise with that because I want Arsenal to win the league as well, and to win the league, I think we need more. But when I look at the signings that we want, and I look at the players that people are suggesting, with all due respect, they're not getting in Liverpool's team. And if that is what we need to sign, and I think it is the level that we have to aim for, is it not better to bring in players that are going to do that and wait for those players than do a Sterling again and bring in a player that's not good enough, that's not going to progress us, not going to take us forwards?
No, I completely agree. And Sterling, you know, that for me is that was a panic buy. That was a PR. Eddie Turner said that, he was not in their plans because they wasted their time trying to sign a player that wanted to go to Barcelona. Like, he made it clear that he wanted to go to Barcelona. Was there other options out there? Possibly. Would we have known what other options are out there? Apparently, there's a story, I don't know how true it is, that we wanted to sign Mbeumo before we signed Sterling. Now, if that's true, questions have to be asked. If that was the case, that he was available before Sterling, why didn't we go for him? I know they lost Mbeumo from Brentford. There was a story that came out that we wanted to get him before we got Sterling. Why wasn't that option? I know they lost Ivan Toney, but again,
that was probably why.
we wouldn't have known the situation if they had approached him. If they said no, he's not for sale. All right, cool. We tried. He's not for sale. Okay, we move on. We find someone else. And obviously, again, Pedro Neto is a person who, yes, his injuries record, his output was not great, but again, he would have been another player that fit on his day. Great winger. He's torn apart, teams plenty of times. Look, he did to City 2 seasons ago.
Why would he sit on the bench for Saka, though? Like, why, if you're Mbeumo and you're going, all right, Arsenal are in for me, Saka's back in March, I'm going to play until then. When Saka's back, I'm on the bench for the foreseeable future. So why would he come?
I wouldn't say foreseeable future, manager, rotate. Obviously you can't play Saka 24/7. He's done that now, and look what's happened. Saka's injured. He's heavily reliant. Even when we had Reece Nelson, yes, he played Reece Nelson, but again, he was heavily reliant, and that's on the manager in terms of utilising your squad. I understand now why Reece Nelson's left, because he wanted to play football. This manager needs to, yes, he's now rotated the squad because he has no choice in terms of the injuries, and that's my critique of the manager. Certain games, Saka did not need to play. Saka hasn't had a rest since he came back from the Euros, pulled a hamstring, and now he's torn the hamstring. He's out for X amount. We could all see it happening, and that was my critique. You can't continue to play him and play him, and then he gets injured, and then wants to complain about, my squad's thin, etc., etc. It doesn't make sense. You utilize the squad to the best of your abilities. If it's a cup game or a Champions League game, and you know that you've got a big fixture coming up against, like, for argument's sake, City, you play Mbeumo. You give Saka a rest. Let him fresh for that Man City game. Those are the things that this manager should have done going forward in terms of utilising the squad. I know Sterling is not the greatest. He's lost his confidence or what, but you play him. You give Saka a rest.
I think, but if you look at Liverpool's use of Salah, he plays every game pretty much, does he not?
Yeah, but Salah's now playing for he could either be playing for a contract. Yes, we know that he's good, but again, they still have other.
Salah's not playing for a contract. Salah's playing every week because he's Salah, mate. Like that's why he plays every week. Like he plays every single week because he's Salah. Rodri plays pretty much every week because he's Rodri. Haaland plays pretty much every week because he's Haaland. They brought in Omar Marmoush and they're starting them together. They're still starting Haaland.
Yeah, like, because Doku's injured. That's that's how they.
Yeah, but I know that's not a Saka or a Salah or a Haaland. Like he rotates. These figures play. So that's the problem that we've got when you're looking at something like an Mbeumo, is that you have to think logically and think, is he going to want to sign for Arsenal, knowing that Saka is going to play the majority, if not all, of those games, and he's going to be a bench? And the argument is probably not. And even then, can you justify dropping 70-odd million quid, which is what Brentford would be looking for? He's under contract, he's got 2 years plus left on his deal. They'd be looking for a big fee, which we ultimately need to spend more so on a centre forward to take us to that next level in that position. I just can't see the justification for that.
We spent 65 million on Kai Havertz, and they said market opportunity. So again,
who is our starting centre forward right now?
Yeah, he's our starting centre forward right now. Right. Going forward, yes, I understand that, but you still could try and see if talk to him, say, okay, rotation, see if he wants to do it. If not, cool, we find someone else. But this notion that he's continued to play one guy, heavily reliant, and he's now had an injury, will Arteta think to do that next season going forward and run the risk of him having another injury? That's the big question that you have to ask yourself, Tom. Is he going to do that again next season? Then that he's had an injury, are you going to continue to play him until he picks up another injury? And that's the fundamental issue there in terms of the manager. You have to learn from your mistakes. You cannot be doing the same thing over and over and over again, and you're coming up with 5. You have to do something different. You have to rotate your players.
But I don't think that those big teams do rotate those players, mate. That's my argument, is that Salah isn't rotated, that Rodri isn't rotated, that Haaland isn't rotated, that Mbappe isn't rotated. That these big players for those big teams, those big clubs will play the majority of all of their games. And that's just what we know. The players below that caliber, your Gakpos, your Diaz's, your Jotas, your Nunez's, are rotated. Your Martinelli's, your Trossards, your Havertz's, to a degree when we have Jesus available, they are rotated. But when you have your Sakas and your Salahs and these, they're just not. They just don't get rotated. They play 99% of matches. And we can perhaps be better at bringing players off sooner, but that still doesn't change the argument that a player like a Brian Mbeumo or any other right-sided player is going to be open to coming to Arsenal, nor the fact that should Arsenal drop huge money on a player like that when they've got a Winery who they've got ready-made to come through and be deployed in those wide right areas or those attacking midfield areas when Odegaard or Saka aren't playing, and that benefits us far more greatly. So if Arsenal are going to spend big money, going to spend huge money on this, it's got to be for a centre-forward, and it's got to be for a player that isn't Boniface, that isn't Matthias Tell, that isn't these players that are in that bracket of your Diaz's, your Gakpos. We need to go, and when we spend money on a striker, it needs to be our Saka but a centre-forward. It needs to be our Salah but a centre-forward. It needs to be that player that is going to take us to that next step, or a player that is potentially going to be that player. They might not be right now, but they could potentially be that player, and that's then the risks with a player like a Sesko. That's what you're banking on with a player like that, is are they going to be that? Mid-25 players, we know where they're at by now. If you're spending big money on those, it's because you believe they're an Isak. You believe they're a player that is in their mid-20s and are going to do it. So that for me is where that problem is for us.
Yeah, fair point.
There we go, Anthony. It's been a pleasure. Always, mate. Have a fantastic day, mate. Enjoy yourself. Speak you soon. Right. Chat box. I've got time for a couple more calls probably before I go and explore this city. There's a lot of people in the chat, of course, that are never going to ring in. They do this every time. You know how this works. The classics of the bingo cards, your excuses FC, your Arteta lawyer, you work for the club BS that you see every morning. They're never going to ring in. And I know I should be better in ignoring them. But I'm not. I'm human. I deal with it. And, they're never going to show up. Anyway, Fizzy, talk to me, mate. Tell me where you're at.
Hi, Tom. Good morning.
Good morning, mate.
How are you doing today?
Yeah, not bad, actually. Not bad. I'm in Spain. I'm looking forward to the game later. I'm frustrated about the window, but I have been for the last month, so I'm kind of used to that feeling right now. How are you?
Well, I'm not too good because of the transfer window, as you said. My frustration stems from two key information we're privy to before January the 1st. One of them being Saka is injured and is going to be out for at least 3 months. And we got that information, I think, on the 21st of December, or probably 23rd, after the scan and the result. And that was like a week before the January transfer window opened. And the other information is the fact that we are going to be having 9 crucial matches in January. And if you look at those matches, they are more like arranged in order of importance. If maybe not so much so, but if you really look at them, if we're able to, assuming we win all our maybe first 6 or 7 matches, we can do away with the last 2 in January and not win them, and we'll still be fine going into the next month. But if and for the fact that we're not equipped enough for those first 5, 6 matches, left us in this present situation we are in. We are out of the Carabao Cup, or more like, okay, we're out of the FA Cup, we're still in the Carabao Cup, but probably a leg out already. And the league, we already lost ground. Okay, we didn't really lose much ground, but we have lost 4 crucial points that could have helped us in terms of getting closer to Liverpool. So if we had equipped ourselves from the maybe first week of January and were able to navigate that period, I'm very sure by now, we'll be talking.
Fizzy? Who?
Well, I'm not in the scouting department. I don't work for the club.
I'm sorry. I mean this with love and I mean this with respect, right? But this argument of I'm not a scout, I'm not working for the club, I don't know who we should go for. If people are willing to say with chest that they think that Arsenal should have done business at the beginning of the window, you need to come to me with names. You need to come with it, because if you haven't got any, then how is it so impossible to believe that might be the reality?
The reason I'm always of that opinion is, even if you look at it back to Arsene Wenger days, Arsenal are always noted for leaving things late in the window. Most times, probably not always, but most times we are noted for. If you look at the 8-2 period when Manchester United defeated us, then we now went, panic buy 5 players towards the end of the window. You look at Thomas Partey, so many other examples like that we leave them late. Even this last window, this summer window, we had to leave our transfers late. With the rumor upon rumor, Calafiori is coming, Mourinho is coming, and all of that. So if we have something to do, why don't we do it on time? So my first, I'll be more annoyed if we, in these last 3 or 4 days, if we end up signing any player than us not signing at all. I'll be more annoyed if we end up signing, because the damage is already more like done. There's no point signing anyone again, because as we stand, as it is now, I don't think I'll be happy if we sign a player compared to if you had signed a player or maybe on the 3rd or 5th of January. So it's more like, what's the signing coming in to come and do? We don't have any game in January again. Our 9 games are gone. Today's game is more like a formality. We just need to avoid defeat. Even if we get defeated, we can still make the top 8. It's still a very huge possibility. So it's not like the game is that important for us to win. So that's my point. So the fact that we found ourselves in this situation on the 1st of January, that though we didn't plan this, but it had happened and we have to make something happen. So that's where I feel the club should have, acted swiftly. Not that we'll now wait till 29th or 30th or 31st or 1st of February. They will now start, okay, another Sterling type signing will now come in. That's what I don't want. I don't want another Sterling type signing. It would have been better off not signing Sterling. I don't know if you believe that. Would have been better off now not signing Sterling, because the wages we are paying him will still be there to be used for another loan signing in this window. And we can still bring another Premier League loan signing if we don't have Sterling. Yeah. So it would have been better off not signing Sterling.
I don't know what the argument is when at the end of that window, obviously, we felt like we needed an attacking player. We go and get Sterling on loan. He comes in. Saka gets injured, Jesus gets injured. We're now in January in this window. There's not exactly an obvious candidate for a loan player from the Premier League right now that would come in, because the obvious candidate in terms of loan for me would be Matthias Tell if he's available, and I'd probably do that over signing nobody, but he doesn't particularly improve things to an amazing level. I'm there, mate, and I'm struggling. Fizzy, I'm conscious of the time, so I'm going to have to move on to the next calls, but I really appreciate you jumping on. Thank you, Fizzy. Thank you. Appreciate it, mate. Franklin's up next. How you doing, mate? You good, Joel? I can't hear you, mate. I can't hear. Oh, there I can. I can hear you now. I can hear you now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, mate.
Wow. It's a privilege. Thank you. All right.
You're very welcome. I can't really hear you, Franklin. Have you got headphones or something? Your audio is very bad. I can't really hear you. Franklin, I can't hear you, mate. Okay. Elliot's up next. Elliot, mate, talk to me.
Tom, here we are again. I told you we'd be here waiting for a player. And let me say this. I'll have 2 points to raise here. The first point is this. Arsenal are not willing to spend money for a title. Simple as that. No. Now you can laugh, Tom. You can laugh. But they are not willing to spend money on the title, especially when the time is here and now to do it. Now, here's the thing, Tom. Now I'm going to make it cost effective. I'm going to make it such that we can bring in a player just paying on wages, simple wages that Arsenal can't afford. Here are two options, because you're asking for options. Here are two options that I brought up to you before that can come in and actually do us a turn right now. That one is Premier League improvement, one is not. Osherman 1, Tony 2. Now,
Tony, what am I listening to? Wait. How's he got in Saudi this season? How's he got on this season?
No. Tom, sometimes.
No. You going?
Wait. Let me explain, Tom. Let me explain, Tom.
Just for the record.
Okay. Let me explain, Tom. Sometimes cometh the man, cometh the hour.
Okay.
You have a man, Ivan Toney, who would be inspired, literally inspired, literally would like to play, would strain every sinew to make a good account of himself if given this opportunity. I know you're scratching your head and saying, okay, he's not even doing well, but I'll tell you something. If given the opportunity, number one, he is going to lighten the load for Havertz. He'll allow Havertz. You can allow for squad rotation.
I don't want someone that's going to do that, Elliot. I don't want someone that's going to.
No. But Tom,
I want a guy that takes us to a title, and that is not Ivan Toney.
Right. Tom, you know as well as I do, Arsenal aren't going to spend on that right now. You know that.
Yeah, but if they do spend on someone who's not that right now, it stops them from spending on their need to spend.
But Tom, it's a loan. You're only getting wages. That's it.
Why would Saudi loan? But wage? Do you know how much his wages are in Saudi?
How much is his wages?
Hundreds of thousands.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars. Don't you think he would exchange that for coming back to the Premier League and trying to win a title for Arsenal?
Well, he left the Premier League to go there, so he's on £400,000 per week apparently.
Okay, he'd be willing to take half of those wages to come back.
Why would the Saudi team want to loan him? Why would they want to just loan him to us?
I don't know if it's a clause in his contract. I don't know if it's a clause in his contract. I'm sure there would be.
Your audio. It might be me, to be fair. I don't know. Maybe my laptop's exploded at these suggestions, but I don't.
Still no. I usually.
Let me refresh my screen quickly, Elliot, and it might be me. It's happened before. So 2 seconds. Okay. Is it me?
Is it you?
I still can't hear. If the chat box can hear you, please let me know.
Can they hear me? Can they hear me?
Okay.
Hopefully you can.
I can hear you now. Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, fair.
There we go.
Okay, here's the deal, Tom. Thank you, my girlfriend. Turn on a little more light for me. Okay, here's the deal, Tom. Ivan Toney if there's a clause in his contract that allow a Premier League contending side to come back and get him, he's willing to forego his deal to come back for Arsenal, even if on loan. Okay, let's say there is. I think he would be a man possessed, a man inspired, a man with a mission to come in and win Arsenal a title and give a good account of himself at the very, very least. Because I'm telling you, it was a last resort that he went out to Saudi in the first place. Yes, he went out for the money, but believe me, if he could stay in the Premier League, he would. And there's no one willing to go, willing to take a chance on him. He would allow for squad rotation. He's a short-term. He's a short-term option for us. He would allow Havertz to rest. There would be no drop-off. If not, there would be greater efficiency, if you ask me, in terms of the role itself. I think he would better run for us. If not, I would easily take on Osimhen. But again, I think there may be complications in that contract in and of itself, and and loan rules. But any of those two options, they're strikers. They play through the middle. They can give us squad rotation. They could give us something different, and they have, I would say, dare I say, if not as good, if not better finishing totals than a Kai Havertz at the moment. Let's face facts. The guy scores maybe 1 out of every 4 possibilities, and let's see that match against Wolves. He had 2 gilt-edged chances on headers. He never put them away. He put them aside. He put them up. He put them down. He put them sideways, and that's not going to win us the title at all.
Well,
that's not going to win us the title. I know, Tom. But at least there are options, Tom.
Aussie, man, there's a worse finishing rate than Havertz, though. I don't get it. Like, I can't do this, Elliot, because I'm sitting here and I'm trying to give people as much rope as I can to tell me why I'm wrong. Because at the end of the day, this whole rhetoric of this bollocks of Arsenal PR and Arsenal, stuff cannot be true, because I'm sitting here trying to give people a platform to come on and tell me why I'm wrong or why the club is wrong. I'm trying to give the opportunity to do that. And then, Elliot, you ring in and you tell me Ivan Toney's the reason. And I just can't.
I'm not saying he's the reason. I'm saying he's an option. I'm not saying he's the reason. I'm saying he's an option.
I want an option, mate. I want the answer.
All right. No. Okay, that brings me to the second part of my argument. Now, this is where I know the Arsenal are going to balk at that. So here's what I think will happen.
Yeah.
Right. They've already made a place for this Sever Naipan. It's a roll of the dice. He's cheap. He's a huge prospect. They bring him in. In a piece.
Age, but yeah, I see what you mean.
You see what I'm saying? They bring him in, but we roll back to it. There is Marcus Rashford out there, Tom.
Oh, come, Elliot.
No.
It's been a real pleasure. It's been a real pleasure,
Tom. We have already discussed this, right? This is an Arteta play out of his own playbook. He'll always reach back for a player who's a rectification job, who's Premier League proven, who's done it before, and here we are again. He may be a last-minute deal, Tom. Don't be surprised. Don't be in the last-minute surprise this happens, Tom. But I think we've gone down every road. We've gone down every avenue. We're waiting. Oh, okay, listen. In future, here's the future plan. Yeah, they sign the striker there. Shoot, what is it now? Why am I not getting his name all of a sudden? The tall striker from
maybe it'll do you a favor.
Yeah, exactly. The tall striker from Leipzig. Sesko. They signed Sesko. Well, that's always in the offing. They signed him in the summer, and they're willing to wait on him. The Lord knows, because we've been here before. Gyökeres is available. Again, my man from Aston Villa is available, and they're not going for him. Quite simply, they got their hearts set. They're besotted on Sesko.
80 million for John Duran is nuts.
It's nuts. But that's nuts. Yeah, it is nuts. It is absolutely nuts.
The Premier League, and he's had a year in the Premier League, and he was okay last season. He's done very well this season and scored in some big moments. Those goals, by the way, that's raised his profile. Some of them are insane goals. They're not the types of goals that he's going to be scoring on a regular basis. He's had an excellent 6+ months. But to turn around and think that after watching that John Duran is the answer to Arsenal's centre-forward issues, I can't get on board with that. I can't take an 80 million risk on a 6-month prodigy that scored some wonder goals to up his goal tally. I can't do that. I just can't justify that.
Absolutely. So the succession plan is this: Sesko in the summer. They'll roll the dice on the Premier League and the Champions League. I think that Rashford's in the offing. They'll roll the dice in the Premier League and Champions League this year because Lord knows they're not willing to spend big money on a man like Tony and that right now.
They're not willing to spend big money.
They're not willing to spend big money.
Think is not good enough. That's the bottom line.
That's the problem. Well, that's the part of the problem is they're not willing to roll the dice on this group.
They've rolled the dice loads of times, Elliot. They rolled the dice loads of times. Havertz was a roll of the dice.
Yeah,
Raya was a roll of the dice.
Raya was a roll. Okay. Raya was a roll of the dice. He's one of the best keepers in the world. Absolutely.
Now, he is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Now he is. Absolutely. But
in the first season, everyone was debating whether we should have signed him because they were saying that Ramsdale should have been starting over him. He's not. We're not having that conversation now, are we? Because he's one of the best goalkeepers in the world, if not the best in the league.
No, absolutely. Listen, I give credit where credit is due. Not Raya is a home run in terms of a signing, but Havertz, the jury's still out. And the fact of the matter is, he has been totally overused now, and he's going to run into injury problems, and he's going to get knocked. And then who do we depend on next? This is why I'm saying the Tonys and the average. All we need is for these guys for squad rotation until we go and get that Sesko. Until we go, and I say the next 2 years, if Sesko doesn't hit it off, we go after Isaac then when he's a little more reasonably priced. I don't say we don't go after him now. I think our strike force going forward will be Sesko and Havertz, which is frustrating. But that's gonna be there too. Done. You know what I mean? We go for a winger, maybe a Williams, maybe another winger, and we move on. But that's gonna be their plan because these have they are not willing to spend outside of the summer transfer window. It's as simple as that. They're not.
They spent a lot of money in the January window on Trossard and Jorginho, and
but these guys were what 25 million, another 30 million.
50 million quid they spent on those three in the January window in 2023. So let's not pretend that they aren't willing to spend in Jan. They are, but they're only willing to spend in Jan when they see it as a financially viable option.
Financially viable meaning reasonably priced. That's Ivan Toney
is the exact opposite of financially viable. That's all I'll say about that. So, Elliot, it's been a pleasure, mate. But I'm going to do you a favour and move
I'll
on.
give you presenting options, guys. But Naipan and Rashford, you watch me. That's going to be a surprise of the season.
If we sign Rashford during this window, I will get you back on here and I will profusely apologise to you. Let's wait and see.
All right. Tom, always a pleasure, mate.
Always a pleasure, mate. Speak to you soon. Lovely stuff. For my sanity, I've only got time for one more call, and Perez has been waiting the longest out of all of this. So I'm really sorry for the rest of you being waiting, but I can't. I can't. I'm away. I've got time before I start work later. I need to go out. I need to have breakfast. I need to have a mental health walk and just sort my life out. So Perez, are you going to tip me over the edge? Talk to me, mate.
For me, though, I believe you're having a good day at Girona. Currently, I would say where my head is at, I didn't have much expectation coming into the window, and basically nothing has happened that I didn't really expect. In terms of options, I would say there have been a few options this January, unexpected ones even. If someone says Vlahovic can be gotten on loan with options, I'm sure that's something that can be explored, especially with the fact that they have Kolomwani now on loan.
He's not better than Havertz, is he?
I wouldn't say he's not better. To be fair, I would never classify Havertz as bad up front. If you look at the data and what he puts in the games, you would definitely see.
I'll give you the data.
I know he's almost 1 in 2, right? He's almost a goal every 2 games. And I know something like that.
For you is what's the big issue with Havertz?
I really don't have much of an issue with Havertz. I just feel
what is his big issue? If we're talking generally, if we're talking about the perception of Havertz and chat box, you can get involved. What's the biggest issue that we've got with Havertz being our centre forward?
I don't have an issue with Havertz being in the centre.
No issues with him. Okay, so you don't want anyone to come in and start because if you had no issues to Havertz, you must think he's the
only reason why I would want someone else to come in is because just look around us on Tom. City just brought in Mamouche. They saw the effect of not having someone else to fill in or to step in when Haaland is not at his best or not giving his best in that particular game. Look at Liverpool. The same goes for them. They had Firmino. They brought in Jota. They had Jota. They brought in other options. Gakpo. Even on Gakpo, they brought in Luis Diaz. Even with Salah, they still brought in Shiza just in case of any. So I feel there would need someone to be exactly. And to be fair, I wasn't against the Sterling coming in last minute because, like we know, Reece was already going out, right, and someone has to fill in. And looking at Sterling's record, nobody would have expected him to be this poor. As at the time he came in, yes, Winnie was on a downward spiral at that point, but nobody would have expected him to be this poor coming in. So that's one that we just have to write off. But the intention of bringing him in was not awful compared to what people are saying about him now. I don't think it was that awful to think about. So I think
I don't either. I just think that when it comes to Havertz, like the main point of contention with Havertz has been his finishing, right? If you look at the chat box right now and you say, what is the main
issue? Strikers miss goals.
Right, but when we're talking about what's going to take Arsenal to the next level, it's like Lewis says, who, by the way, didn't decide to call him despite saying some pretty horrible stuff in the chat, but it's fine. Cowards exist. Ade says finishing. Sir Nicholas says finishing. Scoring goals, says Stephen. It's very obvious that the biggest issue that people see regarding Havertz is his capacity to be a clinical finisher. Now, if we have a look at his goal per shot, which is the number of goals he scores for the number of shots he has, it's this season it's 0.17. Last season it's 0.18. They're his 2 seasons at Arsenal, and he's scoring at a rate of 0.17 goals per shot. So that's what we have in terms of the data. If we look at somebody like Victor Osimhen, he has 0.1. Less than Havertz this season, despite playing in a much more favourable league and having scored a fair few goals. Last season for Napoli, 0.14. In his best season for Napoli, where he scored something like 26 goals, it was 0.18, which is the same as what Havertz's was last season. If we're looking at somebody like Dusan Vlahovic, who people are claiming, I can't believe Arsenal haven't gone and got Dusan Vlahovic, or they should have signed him before, this season, 0.06. Last season, 0.13. Season before that, 0.12. And if we look at someone like Benjamin Sesko, who is the player that I personally look at and go, if you're going to invest in a striker that's going to become the guy for us, you need to have a look at the guy that's scoring the goals on a consistent basis in a really good standing. This season, goal per shot, 0.25. Last season, 0.30. In his last season for Salzburg, he matched Osimhen's best goal per shot rate of 0.18. And that's gone up in a more difficult league. And so when you're looking at that, and Stephen's going, goals and assists, goals and assists. Goals and assists mean jack when it comes to the overriding data. You need to have a look at what they're producing, what they're capable of, what their finishing is. We are talking and moaning about Havertz not being clinical enough. We are moaning about him not scoring enough goals in situations where he needs. So therefore, we need to go into the market and find the players that are the best finishers, that are taking advantage of the majority of the chances that are coming their way. Because when they come to Arsenal, that's what they're going to have to go off. They're going to have to go off the chances that we create for them. So when we suggest that, Osimhen's there, or when we suggest Vlahovic is there, it's all well and good saying that, but they're not producing the finishing numbers that are better than the guy that you say is not good. Not you, Perez, in general. That people say is
so, I'm sorry to interject, but Tom, just let's look at it from this perspective. Let's take it that the data says he is giving us good results, which fair enough is from what we just considered. I still believe we need to have someone else, let's say like a deputy, right? Someone to deputize in the. He can't play all the games. The same thing goes to Saka. I think I saw the conversation you had when say who is going to come in and back up Saka. So I feel there still have to be someone else that can come in certain games to say, okay, you've played 2-3 games. come in, have a run of one game, or come in as a good sub, and then you should be able to expect something from that individual. I still go back to the example of Liverpool. If you look at how that front line was constructed, you will see that it's not totally dependent on anyone. Yes, Salah is a main fix there, but even within the games, you still see certain changes being made, especially with Jota's fitness issues. But you still see them trying to make certain changes to improve the front line. So I wouldn't want us to say, oh, because there's nobody out there, we should just leave. Look at the last game; he literally couldn't stand at the end of the Wolves game. So we need someone else to be able to come in, even if the person would not give us entirely what we need right now, but it should be able to satisfy the objectives at least to the end of the season, when we can then go in and get our primary objective. That's why I was looking at the loan options, especially with individuals like Vlahovic or any other forward that we can get easily with a very uncomplicated deal. Yeah, so that's the perspective I'm coming from. I don't know if you see it in that way.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I'm very much in the camp of Perez that Arsenal are going to have a high bar when it comes to transfers, and they should have a high bar when it comes to those players. When they're trying to find somebody that's going to take them to that next level and take them forwards. I see the comparative examples in Liverpool, and you look at the numbers of players they've got in those attacking positions, and it's the same as ours. And had they this season had their Salah out, or rather their Saka out, and had they had their Jesus out, and they'd have the situation of having basically a starting front three, and that's about it, and a Chiesa, which is comparable to Sterling, I don't think they'd be doing much better than what we're doing this season, if at all. And then, of course, when you look at what we need to do, we need to bring in that centre forward as being the next marquee figure in the forward line. And the club are moving back towards a self-sustaining model because they've gone year after year after year of spending way more than what they've brought in ultimately. And so that's why they want to move back to that model, because we've got ourselves back into competing for titles. We've got ourselves back into a position where we can win the league and can potentially get the biggest trophies that are available to us. Doesn't mean that we're going to suddenly stop spending. That's not what it means at all. You know, there's already suggestions we're going to go out and activate Zubimendi's release clause in the summer. There's an absolute indication that Arsenal spending is not going to stop, but Arsenal are absolutely going to spend in a more sustainable way as opposed to what they've done in previous seasons, because they can't afford not to. And if you look at Liverpool, it's a similar story. They didn't bought anyone in the summer window bar Chiesa, and they're not looking like they're going to bring anybody in January either. So that's ultimately the scenario where I'm at, Perez, and people aren't going to be happy with that. But that is that's just the reality. That is what is happening. So I can't really be more clear about it.
So I remember when we started the window talk, you were very clear in terms of your objectives for this window. In view of the realities coming around, have you had a change in your perspective, or would you still be disappointed if we don't get someone in this window?
If Arsenal don't sign anybody in this window, it's a failure. If Arsenal don't sign anyone in this window,
I think we both agree on that. I believe we both or everyone will agree on that. I will say that all fans would definitely agree on that perspective. And so, in view of that, I still feel if we want to go into a self-sustaining model, do you think that we are at the point where we can go into that now, considering what it did cost us, or how quickly we fell off when we tried using that model a couple of years back? At this point, these are second year in the Champions League. These are probably third year competing for the league. Do you believe at this point we are at the phase where we can start going into a sustainable process?
Yes, because if you look at the age bracket, of course, of the players in particular, that's the first point of view. We have a squad that are continually on the rise. Our key players are in their early to mid 20s, and some in their mid to late 20s, and entering those prime years. So yes, you would argue in the summer you're going to be replacing some of the older figures in the group like Jorginho and Partey in midfield, and there's already others, as I've mentioned, the suggestion that Zubimendi, player again in his mid-20s, going to be coming in to replace those. So that's a sustainable turnaround of quality of a starting level player. And then you look at the centre forward position, and the player that we're looking at, what we look at is Sesko. We're looking at Sesko being the key figure because Isak's just not attainable. So you bring in a 20-year-old, 21-year-old by the summer, centre forward with brilliant potential that's already performing at an elite level in the Bundesliga and in the Champions League and on the European stage internationally as well. So you're looking at and going, yes, those types of signings are what will continue a sustainable approach to Arsenal being, in that position where they are competing. Because that's what we've got. We've got the quality to be able to compete. We haven't got the luck and the fortune at the moment, unfortunately. That's for sure, and hopefully that will turn. But you look at what this squad is right now, and you look at what the aims are, of course, in the market by the players that we want to sign in Zubimendi and Sesko, for example, that may happen in the summer. I hope one of them happens, as in Sesko now, but I'm not very hopeful, unfortunately, because of the financial situation. But when it comes to that summer window, if it was to me, Sesko and Zubimendi coming in as two starting figures, plus on top of that, perhaps some younger players that are going to add, potential and depth to other positions in the squad. You get Ben White back from injury, Saka coming back from injury. You replace Tomiyasu with somebody who's ultimately going to be fit. I think we have to bring in, looking at maybe another left side defender, although Lewis-Skelly coming through gives us a lot of options there now as well, which is great. Waneri coming through gives us another attacking option as well up in that area. So I think you need to look at that and think, yes, there is definitely the potential for this side to be established in the title race as we are, and to continue in terms of a sustainable approach while being in that position. Because if we don't do it in a sustainable way, we will fall, and we will fall hard. And if you look at the poor recruitment and the gung-ho approaches of teams like Manchester United, for example, you can see what the results of that can lead to. So, yeah, I do. In answer to your question, yes, I do think we're in a position to do it.
I totally agree with a lot of the points you raised there. Although my counter to that would be that, yes, we have a good age for the squad currently, and we are hoping to bring in also younger individuals to continue to fill in for the age ones who will be leaving over time. But there's still a concern that if this group, this young core, is not properly is not kept together, for example, if they are not winning, or if they don't see themselves winning, nobody wants to be a runner-up forever, right? So at some point, you want to start getting the accolades for your work. And if they don't see themselves getting those accolades, they don't see trophies to show for it, they will definitely, some of them would want to, or they will be enticed by those who can give them guarantees of these accolades.
Yeah, for sure. The problem is, the problem with this argument is that ultimately Arsenal are in a position where they're potentially looking to win trophies. The argument of if they haven't won trophies, then players are going to want to go somewhere they can win them doesn't work.
I'm looking at it, sorry to question, I'm looking at it based on what we said. We are entering into a sustainable process. I mean, the process has already probably started or starting for this season, right? No trophies this season. We are still on the front for about 3 of them. But realistically, if no improvement in the squad with the gap we have already in the league is not too big.
Do you think a sustainable approach means not improving the squad? Because that's an important clarification.
No.
That's what you just said. You just said if we don't improve the squad.
In this summer, on winter, sorry, that's what I'm trying to emphasize. If we don't improve the squad this winter, it's definitely going to impact our ability to get our hands on any of those trophies, like it has impacted on the league already. So my point is, if we don't get, let's say we are not able to get any of them over the line for this season, next season, some of these players are going into 2 years of their contracts. What will be the incentive for them to want to renew, to enable us continue the sustainable process? Because, if we are to replace any of them, even if we sell very good, it's still going to be very expensive trying to replace them in view of how the market works compared to when we signed them, and inflation and everything that we'll have to factor in. So in view of that, if they are not getting anything now, they are going to 2 years of their contracts, probably getting the highest turn, like we see the tactics Real Madrid have been using for a while now. Definitely other teams will start exploring situations like that also. If we are not able to provide these individuals like the means for them to see the end, which is the trophies. They have tried 1, 2, 3, but because of 1 or 2 minor improvement, they are not able to get their hands on these trophies, and they get their heads turned. My concern now is, if we lose somebody like that, or individuals like that to other teams, we definitely want to replace them in a sustainable mode, sustainable system. And for us to be able to get people or players that can replace them in that mode will also be expensive. It's not going to come cheap. Do you think our sustainable process would enable us to continue to get such kind of profiles, or do we have to probably go a step down to get players who would have the potential to be on the up, thereby keeping us back in the top 4 system that we were on for a very long time again?
Yeah, I see where you're coming from, particularly regarding January. I don't think that the sustainable approach hinges on what we do in this Jan in particular, because this Jan is it's a very unfortunate situation for Arsenal that we don't have Saka and that we don't have Jesus out for a year now, and that wasn't something that was obviously expected at this point. It's put pressure on this window to do more, and I think that's been evident in the way Arteta has spoken about it in his press conferences and his interviews as well. But the reality is that Arsenal, to have a sustainable approach, it means that when you want to sign a player, they have to be the right one. Arsenal are trying. It's not like they're sitting on their hands, as some people that they think that they are. They're not sitting on their hands at all. They are active, and they are trying to find solutions during this window. That may not end in a signing, and in that case, I will still call it a failure, because that's what it is. Arsenal, for me, have to bring in somebody. They have to find a European loan. They have to find something that is going to be able to take them to that next. Not take them to the next step necessarily during this season, but just someone that's going to be able to help them continue to be competitive this season while they are missing those key players. And if that's, say, a Matthias Tell on loan, then I'm fine with that, because you have to find something. Because if we don't find anything, we're in trouble. We're in trouble if you don't find any, because these players are already dead on their feet. So it's going to be a case, Perez, of waiting and see. It's as simple as that. It's going to be a case of just waiting and seeing what these next 5 days holds for us. And if it holds nothing, then I think Mikel Arteta, to achieve a title or a Champions League or a League Cup with what we've got, is incredibly hard. Incredibly hard to be able to achieve that. If he gets close to it, although people won't give him the credit for it, it would be mad, even in that sense. If Arsenal don't sign any players, despite Arteta clearly calling for them, it changes the manager conversation, that's for sure. And it changes the conversation into a degree, and certainly puts more emphasis on the ownership again, like it was perhaps during the 2010 period, far more so than it was about the manager. Because we know that what Arteta's doing with the limited squad he has available, and still keeping us in the title race, and keeping us 6 points ahead of City, and keeping us in a position where we're third in the Champions League table, you would think, after tonight. And of course, in a League Cup semi-final, that it sucks that we didn't win that home game, but that leg's not dead yet, and we'll see what happens in the second leg. But it would be mad if Arsenal win the title this season, or win the Champions League. If Arsenal were to win either of those two competitions this season, it would be one of the greatest footballing achievements of a manager. It simply would be to be able to do that this season, based upon everything that's happened to Arsenal. It would be unbelievable for Arsenal to do that. So, but I think it's impossible without adding somebody during this January window. I just can't see how it's possible.
I believe there we find our common ground. Some that's the expectation from myself also. I expect them to be able to bring in someone, even if you don't to take us to the next level, at least someone that will help us maintain the level currently for this season. I think that's just the expectation, and we hope that they get it right.
Perez, absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for calling in, mate. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. Lovely stuff. Oh, there we go. Oh, we're here. 11 o'clock. Well, my time, 10 o'clock your time, if you're in the UK. And I am going to call it a day. I didn't expect to be doing a 2-hour show, but that's what we've done. I think I summed it up where my position is pretty well there with Perez. I think for Arsenal to win the league this season, we have to bring somebody in. I cannot see a scenario, realistically, where we win the league or the Champions League, having done nothing in this window. Now, I support Arteta's view that we need someone. That Arteta is sitting there and telling us and telling the ownership and telling you that we need to bring somebody in, that we want to bring somebody in, that we have to bring quality in, because he's right. All those things are right. No one could disagree with that. No one's disagreeing with Arteta saying we absolutely have to go and bring somebody in and that we have to try and sign someone and that they have to be quality. All of those statements are 100% indisputable. It is now on the club. It's on Jason Ato. It's on the ownership. It's on the recruitment team. It's on the analysts to go out and find somebody within their financial means. And it is those last few words that are so key to this conversation, because despite our FIFA and Football Manager playing fan base to a degree, they are working within constraints. They are working within certain restrictions. And they have got to try and find something within those constraints, either on a temporary basis or through a miraculous permanent deal for a player like a Sesko. But I can't see that happening. The idea of Arsenal spending, like Pavel saying, Gyökeres, like an €100 million release clause is just not something Arsenal are going to be able to do. And he's already said, by the way, he's staying until the end of the season. So the idea of doing that in January is utterly mad and entirely unrealistic. The same it goes for spending 70 or 80 odd million on Sesko, where that is what Leipzig are going to be asking for when they need to qualify for the Champions League and will not be able to do so without their star striker. So the likelihood is that it's going to be, as I've predicted and have said before, a European loan. That's what I'm expecting, if anything. But if you were to ask me, what am I banking on, a signing or no signing, at the moment, I'm leaning in towards no signing. I'm leaning into I don't think that we're going to sign somebody. And that will be a failure because Arsenal need somebody and the manager wants somebody. So you're failing Arteta by not bringing somebody in. So we absolutely 100% have to bring someone in during this last 5, 6, however many days is left of this window. And if we don't, the idea of winning the title or winning the Champions League, it would be a monumental achievement to be able to do either of those two things this season, if indeed we don't bring anyone in. Even if we are able to bring just a loanee in, even then, like the odds of Arsenal winning something this season with what we've been, with the cards that we've been dealt this season, the players that we've lost, with the decisions that we've faced, it's incredibly unlikely that that's going to happen. Anyway, that brings us to the end of today's show. Thank you so much for those that have stayed respectful. Really appreciate your time as always. Keyboard warriors, you can go screw yourselves. As always. Thankfully, it's a very tiny portion of you that are. And the majority of you are absolute legends. I really appreciate your support. And I hope you have a fantastic day. I know that will be very much associated with the game later on this evening. And I hope indeed that you do have a great Wednesday. I'm going to go enjoy the benefits of Girona for a bit before cracking on with work a little bit later on today as well. Stay safe, stay well, stay happy and respectful. And as always, up the Arsenal.